All right, so shifting gears again into business now. So what we wanted to talk about today is decisions on inflation. And what that means is decision making, as a consumer, a person living in inflation. The reality that I'm finding more and more, whether it's when I'm consulting or when I'm just living my life or going through my day to day, is there are a lot of people out there who are living check to check. There's a lot of people out there who are in really extreme debt. And really, my goal to be able to help with that is just to give people options and give people ways that they can feel a little bit more confident about doing what it is they want to do. Realistically, you're not going to be able to help somebody who doesn't want to be helped.
Yeah.
If somebody is like, nope, this works for me, this is the way I'm going, go that way.
Yeah.
But if there is somebody who does have questions, gosh, I wish I could, save a little bit more per month, or I wish that I could find a way to get over this hump, or I wish that I could find the confidence to be able to do X, Y, and Z. Those are kind of the areas I want to help with. So inflation for specificity is when the market begins to change and things become more expensive. So this all roots from the big ticket items. You can look at gasoline, you can look at big time travel. You basically look at big business to find where inflation happens, and then there's a trickle down. So it trickles down into the cost of your food, the cost of your gas, the cost of the daily, things that you want to be able to utilize. So I'm going to give a couple ways, that I would recommend for people to be able to make decisions during inflation, and then some ways that are a little bit more niche, type situations. So some big ways is if you're a person who's eating out, pretty frequently, spending a lot of money at restaurants or food spots, you can go to the grocery store, buy food, and then cook it or heat it up. And so for anybody who's coming back with, well, I don't cook, well, I don't have the time, well, I don't whatever, you can meal prep when you're talking about actual meals, which is like I'm going to prepare multiple meals in advance, set it up in a situation where it's quick trigger to be able to eat it. Examples of that would be like making yourself some chicken. And at the beginning of the week, you're going to make yourself 5 pieces of chicken. And then you're going to get all those plates ready and you're going to put it in the freezer or fridge. And then when it's time for you to eat each coming day, you heat it up and it's prepared for you. You can do that with some vegetables. You can do that with some pasta. You can do that with whatever. Another example of that would be utilizing simple stuff like oatmeal and developing a routine. But the two things always to pay attention to when it comes to trying to save money on food is time and desire. So time that you have to be able to consume the food, make the food, clean up the food, whatever the case, and then desire of what it is you want to eat. So if you're a person who's like, I really want to eat healthy and find the ways to do that, then you want to just buy yourself some healthier stuff. You want to buy yourself, things that are chicken or fish or whatever the case that don't have a lot of skin or aren't fried or whatever the case. Get yourself vegetables instead of fries. Get yourself more water instead of drinks with a bunch of sugar. Make simple decisions like that. But then the whole preparation part of it is where like the schedule has to be there. So if you're a person who can stand eating the same thing repetitively, that's going to save you time rather than making a bunch of meals. If honestly you're a person who doesn't like eating the same thing and you like variation, then you just have to create a cadence. You have to be able to create a schedule. And so creating 30 minutes or an hour of a schedule and then being able to do something that takes 5 to 10 minutes consistently is always going to be a better situation than every single day spending 45 minutes trying to think up of something new. And it's going to be more healthy and cost effective than doing something like, hey, I'm going to go get fast food and it's going to take me less than 10 minutes, but I don't really like what I'm putting in my body and I don't like the price it's costing me.
Yeah.
So that would be one example I'd bring in. Do you have an example for the people out there who want to try to be able to save during inflation? I've got a couple more.
One of them I was thinking about is a housing situation if you can control it, right?
Okay.
I think there's a lot of times where you may have too much house or you may have too much apartment or you may be in this area. So it's like, are you actually in a position to downsize in one way or another? Can you go from a 2-bedroom to a 1-bedroom? Can you go from a 3 or 4-bedroom house to a 2-bedroom house and like cut that price, cut the mortgage, cut the rent, something like that? And obviously rents have been through the roof, which is crazy. I mean, but can you make the adjustment from this amount of rent to this amount of rent to lower it down for yourself and then possibly save that money you've been talking about saving?
Right.
Like everything to me is just about the big three and how you look at it. And maybe your situation doesn't allow that. Maybe you have kids, maybe you have a family, maybe you have this, maybe you have that. But you got to find a way to cut wherever you can to put yourself in a better financial situation if it's possible.
Yep. And that lends itself into the whole concept of spending money on ancillary things. So having a needs versus wants list, I believe personally, is very important, and people blur that line too much.
Yeah.
It's and we'll talk about the male side of things, we'll talk about the female side of things, because there are some things that begin to feel as if they're a need for females. An example would be there's a lot of women who might tell you, no, getting my hair done, getting my nails done, getting my eyebrows done, that is a need. I don't feel like myself. I don't feel presentable if I don't do these things. Again, that's a personal choice. I'm not going to tell anybody that's a need or not a need a situation. If you decide to put that on your needs list, then my opinion is you don't also get to put, the new handbag on the list. You don't also get to put, the makeup contouring or I had a girl yesterday who came in like, oh, my spray tan got jacked up, by my arm sleeves, whatever the case. And I go, okay, if you're a person who feels more confident when you have that, whatever the case, that's part of what you want to do, all kudos to you, but you have to make decisions.
Yeah.
And that's why this is called decisions during inflation. To me, everything can't be on the needs list. So you got to give yourself one of two things.
Yeah.
Either a specific amount. I cannot have more than 10 things on my needs list. Point blank, period. Yeah. Well, what if I add 10 things or less? Or there has to be an amount that you're spending, and that has to be a percentage. So needs, in my opinion, should not exceed 20% of what you make. Needs. And then right now I'm not talking about, your house and that kind of thing. I'm talking about ancillary day-to-day additions. Yeah. So Netflix, maybe for you really enjoy Netflix. Netflix can be on your needs list if you're not spending money on nails, hair. Say you do your own nails. Yeah. Say you do your own hair, whatever the situation. Then maybe Netflix can be on your needs list. Netflix can't be on your needs list if you have, I've just got to have a day at the spa, and I've got to have my massage, and I've got to have my toes, being done with the kid. Okay, then Netflix can't be added to the needs list. And so if you're saying 20%, let's use a round number. Let's say you make $2,000 a month, and we're going to call 20% of that $400. So you have $400 that you get to spend a month on needs. Yeah. And this month was $450. It can't work that way. There's got to be a budget. And so the base of everything we're talking about comes down to having a schedule and a plan. Yeah. Where people get in trouble is when they have no idea what's coming in or what's going out. There's not a schedule, there's not a plan, there's not a spreadsheet, there's not an understanding. And so the only way you're going to get yourself to a space where you feel confident about money and you feel anywhere near financial freedom is you have to understand.
You got to see it.
You got to see it. You have to understand where it is, what's happening with it, what's been the trend. You might look up and go, okay, in the first half of the year, I actually did great, with my expenses. But then as I got closer to holiday season, things totally flipped on my head because I love giving gifts and I love going to holiday parties and I love traveling in November and December and October. And you got to be able to see that and go, okay, then that means in the first half of the year, you are literally saving and shelling and shelling and shelling. And then you take a percentage of that savings and go, I'm going to use this and sprinkle it out during the second half of the year. And then it works. But where you don't find yourself in trouble during inflation is when there's a plan. So whether it has to do with food, whether it has to do with housing, whether it has to do with driving, whether it has to do with keeping your body right, gym membership, massage, whatever the things you like to do are, there has to be a plan, and you have to understand what the budget is. And what I would recommend to people is 20% needs, or less. If you can really get underneath that, it's better.
I think the big three is something that I don't think everybody is paying attention to, right?
Explain to the people what that is.
The big three. So the big three are your housing. So that means your rent or your mortgage, your car payment, your insurance, your gas, your maintenance, and then finally your food. Are you going to the grocery store? Are you eating out? I think that's the thing that everybody needs to figure out exactly what that's going to cost. And obviously it's going to vary. Sometimes your housing expenses vary and your car expenses vary, but you'll have a general number of what that is, but I don't think everybody's paying attention to that. And then on top of that, I'm seeing everybody trying to max out in all three of those categories, which gets them in trouble. You're either in the nice apartment or you're in the house with the mortgage, and then you've got the newer car, you've got the luxury car, and so that comes with more expenses and more maintenance. And then food, everybody's going to eat out. You're not buying groceries as much as you should. And so for me, I'm always looking at what are my big three expenses. I'm trying to keep one or two of them low, and then I can reach on the third one. For me, I like to eat. Mm-hmm. So my other expenses are low. My car expenses are low. My housing expenses are low. but I know that I can go and eat whatever I want whenever I want to. I can go and grab food. So I think it's paying attention to those things, and especially during inflation, like everything's running up. And so you're like, okay, well, how do I balance that? And I think even attached to that, we're getting close to leaving the normal 5-day work week.
For sure.
I think a lot of people are having problems with. People are like, I'm working 6 days, I'm working 7 days a week. I'm like, we're here now. Unless you're willing to be like extremely uncomfortable, which me and you are. Like we're willing to be like extremely uncomfortable
to get to the goal.
Yeah, like to get the things that we want. Like we live in ways that most people would not live. Like I already know me and you, we've always done it. We live in a way where most people would not want to do that. We drive things for a long period of time that people would not want to drive, right? Like with our food situation, we've always been pretty loose with our food situation, but that's because the other things are taken care of. But we're in a place where if you want all this stuff, you probably need to work the 6th day.
Yeah.
Or the 7th day. And I think that's where people are starting to freak out about with the inflation situation. And I'm like, you either make that big choice or you make the other big choice.
Yeah, someone's got to give ultimately.
No doubt.
I mean, you hit it on the head just in terms of it's really just a decision. Like, what do you want to do? You want to live the luxury lifestyle? Okay, then you're working 7 days and you're going overtime. Okay, you don't want to live the luxury lifestyle? Then cut back on expenses. Like, I have an uncle who decided to retire earlier than most people would retire.
Yeah.
But to his credit, he drives a Toyota Echo with the roll down window, and he makes sure his housing situation is at a minimum. It's like, I could live here. I could be comfortable here. These are my daily expenses. I go, draw blood. I get a little bit of money that comes in. I get my retirement check. And I make decisions on eating out. Even when I come in town, literally, I'll be like, yeah, you want to go out to eat? Yeah, I'll be there. We'll sit down, and he goes, I'm not eating. I already ate before I left my house. I'm just here for the conversation. Yeah. And he's comfortable in that space. Yeah. He's not like, well, I got to put on a show. Well, I got to wear a certain thing. Like, he's comfortable in that space. And I have people on the other side of my family who are opposite. Like, oh, you come in town, it's got to be a big thing. We got to go out to eat. We got to get the person picking us up. We got to go to the game, sit in the VIP, do the da-da-da-da. And you look and you might go, okay, all right, like, whatever the situation. But to both of those situations' credit, I watch and see, okay, you want to live that lifestyle? You are not adding on, which is great. That's why it works. This person wants to live this lifestyle. That same next morning, they'll be right up. Like, I got to go to work earlier because I got to bring it in. I got to go do the thing. So that's where in those situations I can respect. But like you said, there's a lot of people out there who are not. They want their cake and eat it too. I want to work, 4 days, but I want the luxury lifestyle in all the ways. And it's like, you could put it on a credit card, but you're going to be upset. 10 years from now, you're going to be upset. When people are telling you no, loan people are telling you no, and money's going to run out. So you always have to be looking towards what's happening next. I use that concept in sports. I use it in business and relationships. You always have to be looking at what's going to happen next, okay? That way. So be present and look at what's happening next. All right, so interest rates, same type of situation. There's this big debate always when it comes to housing, when it comes to cars, when it comes to anything with interest of, should I wait until the interest rates drop, or should I get into the market now and then wait for the interest rates to drop? And the answer to that always becomes it depends on your situation, right? It depends, like what you want, and it depends on when you want to have it. Like there's people who can, let's use, so people can understand this conversation more. Let's use some round numbers. Let's say it would cost you $500,000 for a house, which in California, that ain't happening. But let's say $500,000 where you live for a house. Down payment of that. So I've got to get to $100,000, for a down payment on that ish. There's 10%, there's, let's say 20. So I got to get to $100,000. I could squeak out $100,000 right now, but then it's going to cost me between my mortgage and interest rates where they are right now, and my homeowner's insurance and property taxes. It's going to cost me about $3,000 a month, to be able to cover all this. Okay, so I got to put $100,000 down. That empties me. Boom. I might have a little bit in savings, but that empties me. Yeah. And then now I'm working. My job pays me about $3,500, $3,600 a month, and I have to pay $3,000 to make sure I maintain this house. That leaves me and or my family or whatever with $600 to operate with per month. Yeah. I have to, for 30 days, food, car, gas, lights at the house, which I didn't mention before, water potentially at the house, or gas, electric, ancillary stuff, any kind of eating out I want to do, hair, makeup, club sports, whatever. That ain't happening at $600. So in that situation, you get two options. You go, I'm going to wait till these interest rates come down, and then it would cost me. And in the meantime, mind you, I don't spend that $3,000 a month. I already have my $100,000. I keep the $100,000 where it is. I put $1,500 a month towards that $100,000. And if I wait a little bit, that number is going to be bigger, and I'll be a little bit closer. And then I can wait for interest rates to come down, and I might pay, $500,000 house. I might pay $2,200 or $2,100 a month, to be able to satisfy this. And then rather than having $600 a month, now I have $1,400 a month, which is way more breathing room. That's the way that side has to be looked at. Or option B is, and this would be the flip. Let's say I'm in a situation where right now I'm paying rent on a place that is, call it $2,000 a month. I'm paying $2,000 a month. I bring in that same exact 36, and every month I'm putting that $2,000 down. And some people would see it as throwing it out the window. Some people will say that I'm investing in the space I live, where my kids go to school, whatever. So that leaves me with $1,600 a month. I still have my $100,000, whatever the case, when I'm renting. And I'm going to keep renting. I'm going to keep renting. I'm going to keep renting. And so over time, you can stack up and go, I had my $100,000, and then I'm going to keep going this $1,600 until I can pay it off cash. Like I'm not getting a mortgage. I'm going to pay it off cash. I'm going to wait. You're waiting years and years and years to do 100%. That. But ultimately, the only danger and risk you run in that situation is if you're like, let's say inflation goes up and now my $2,200 goes to 24, 26 to 28, and I have to move out of this neighborhood. And or if I run into something catastrophic, that blows up my ability to be able to use that $100,000. Like, say I got to go $50,000 on a medical thing, or $40,000 on. I'm not really foreseeing anything that's $40,000 if you don't have a house. But let's say there's something that happens that's extreme. And you have to cut into that. Then all of a sudden you're starting back at square one, and you don't have anything you're building equity on. So where I'd go is the real move, like. For somebody in that situation, and again, I want to keep repeating, it's very situational. There's no one size fits all. But where the real move is, if you start to look at property and you can't buy something cash, the way is you get yourself that $100,000, whatever, you buy something that's $500,000, maybe less, maybe multifamily property, maybe single family property, whatever. You get yourself property, and then you rent that property. And you let that situation start to build, because it's still yours. And as long as you're just doing 1-year contracts, you can pop in on the next year if you want to, or like, I just really want to live in the house now. Boom. And so let's use that same exact scenario and go, you have 100,000, you're making 36, and you want to get in this first house. Okay, I'm going to use that 100,000 towards the down payment of this house. Now I own the house. I'm going to stay in my current situation, which I'm paying 2,000 on, and this is where it gets a little tricky, because she's like, hold on, now I'm over budget. I threw out my 100,000. It cost me 3,000 to fund this house right now with the current interest rates. And I'm paying 2,000. That 5 does not add up to 36. So you go, all right, I got to stack a little bit until I can get to a space where for 6 months I could cover that if there was no renter. Like, once I can cover that 6 months, and I might have to go hustle it down. I might have to go work overtime. I might just wait it out, whatever. I might have to borrow from a family member, whatever. I got to get to my 6 months. And then from there, if I could set up that same exact scenario, I spend my 100,000, got that house. I have my little cushion in case I can't go over. I'm still bringing in my 3,600 with my current work situation. Now I can rent my place. Call it 3,600. Hopefully you can rent it for 3,000. Hopefully you can rent it for 3,000. But let's say you can only get 25. I rent it for 25. That leaves out of the 36 I make, 2,000 goes towards my rent of where I live. 500 goes to that mortgage where I'm building equity. That leaves me $1,100 per month that I can operate with. I own a house that is building equity. Somebody's helping me pay for it and hopefully respecting it while they're in it. I might have some fees here and there to have to pay for fix it up. But it's starting to build equity. And if I look up in 5 years, my house is that much more paid off. I can get out of this rent situation and slide right into something that I already know I enjoy. That would be a great move for the people who are thinking about it if they're not wanting to feel that stress and that pressure of like, well, now I've got to hold this mortgage or whatever the case during a time where interest rates are really high. And then if interest rates ever come down and you're like, woo, I can refi, and now my thing to live here would be $2,200, and I was already paying $2,000 before. Now I don't need somebody to rent my spot. I can just live in my house, and I'm back in a great situation with some of it already paid for. Right? So I would naturally recommend people take action as quickly as you can because you can start to build equity. You can start to make something happen. However, the quickly as you can needs to be predicated on what you can afford with a 6-month cushion. Where people get themselves in crazy trouble that I'm watching is when people dive in without the information. There's no emergency fund. An emergency happens, and then it's like, well, now I'm foreclosing. Now I lost all the money I put on the down payment, and I'm back in my rental situation. So,
I think a lot of people who own or who have houses not own them. The banks own them.
Yes.
But a lot of people who have houses, they sell their house for it.
Yeah.
Because most of them did not prepare for what it really takes to have a house.
Right.
Right? It's not just the down payment, it's the closing costs, it's making sure you pay for the maintenance, the insurance, and all that stuff. There's always going to be some repairs that you're going to have when you move into a house that need to be taken care of. Hopefully it's not the big one like the roof
Right.
or your HVAC system.
Right.
But it's making sure, okay, you have the down payment, but do I have like half the down payment over that?
Right.
Like if I had 100, do I have 150?
Right.
To make sure I can take care of those other things.
Right.
And then even adding on to that the lowering interest rates. Like everybody's waiting for lower interest rates. I was like, no. You're just asking to get in trouble now. Why? Because now there's going to be more people going into the housing market, which is then going to raise the prices of the houses.
Exactly.
So you're going to wait so then you can pay a higher price for the house because the interest rate has dropped. And on top of that, now you're going to have to bid higher because there's more people who are like, oh, you just dropped down this interest rate, I'm going to step in now.
Exactly.
That's the thing. So you got to pay attention to that and always make sure you got money on the sideline and you're saving. You're in a position to make a move when you want to make a move.
Exactly.
But I would definitely say go now.
Exactly. The key, I mean, you just hit it on the head, but the key is you have to understand that once everybody comes into the theater, the movie's no longer interesting. Like, it's a situation where if you go at the time when the interest rates drop, the rest of the world saw the interest rates drop too. So everybody's in. Now every offer you go into is multiples. You're cranking up, over asking.
Yeah.
And you're going to end up in a place you don't even really like that much. Like, you have two choices. You're either going to be the highest bidder on a place you really like, and it's going to crank your pocket anyway, which is also going to crank your property tax, which is also going to crank your insurance, which is also going to crank your resale value and what you have to pay, like, on the turnaround.
Yeah.
And then, or you act now and you bet on yourself and you go, all right, I'm going to keep my other expenses low and manageable and high. But the root of every single thing we're talking about is having a plan. Like, you would have to be able to present it on a sheet of paper and make it make sense. Exactly. You'd have to go, okay, here's what I make on a daily basis. Here's what I'm spending on a daily basis. Not just a monthly, a daily, like, because you can start to get ancillary. And then here's what I want. I want house, I want car, I want beach trips, travel, vacation, whatever it is you want. I want to live in California. That's the thing. Like, you put all that on a piece of paper and you go, how am I going to make it work first? And then where's the safety net?
Yeah.
If you can do that, it's time. If you're like, I don't have a safety net yet, you got two options. You either go hunt it down and you grind it and you figure out how to make it happen, or you're patient and you wait and you wait and you wait until the time is to make it happen. But it's not necessarily about lowering expectations. It's just choosing true desire to me. Yeah. Like, there's a lot of people out there who would see it as, well, I want a 4-bedroom house. It's 3 stories with a big backyard, and I want to live by the beach. Yeah. It's like, that's great. If you really want that, you can't do nails and hair and eyebrows and eat out and Morton's Steakhouse
luxury
and
car,
this and that.
vacation.
Yeah, you can't do all that. You got to pick.
3 to 5 kids.
Yeah, you got to pick.
All that stuff adds up.
You got to pick. What do you want the most?
You buying designer?
Yeah, like, for real. Like, what do you want the most? What do you want the most? Like, if you want the everyday, you don't need the house. Mm-hmm. If you want I want to be seen out in my Maserati, you know, with my Louis on my hand and my da-da-da, you could do that. Yeah. But rent. Yeah. And rent low means. Like, just don't let anybody know, like, you're in Bixby Knolls.
Yeah.
Right?
Just
situation.
Just rent, get the cheap rent,
or,
and then, like, ball out on the car.
Or flip. But real talk, if I'm giving the advice, I tell people, like, you always have to go for the things that appreciate. You know? Always. The house, the art, the things like that, they appreciate. Like, the stuff that's going to depreciate right away, you might love it forever, you might fall out of love with it, but it will have limited value when you get to the other side of it. Like, you have to stick to the things that appreciate.
What I'm thinking is, like, I don't think most people can afford to have more than 2 big things. Right. And when I say that, I mean, either big mortgage and big car payment,
Right.
or big rent and 2 or 3 kids,
Right.
right? Or student loan debt, right? Credit card debt or personal loan debt. So I'm always of the mindset of, I'm like, okay, if you've got these big things outstanding, like, you gotta make sure you take one of them out before you go into the next one, right?
Right.
Like, what we see is, like, you got your lawyer, your doctor, or whatever, and it's like, okay, well, now I have all this student loan debt, but now I'm gonna go be a lawyer, so now I'm gonna go get the really nice apartment or the house, and I'm going to get the really nice car, and then I got, like, the designer, and I got, like, the suit or the nice stuff, right? And then, so you're talking about all this stuff. Now you got housing debt, now you got credit card debt, student loan debt. It's like all these things add up, and it's like, you'll look up and they'll be like, oh yeah, like, I'm buried. Like,
Right.
every month, like, I'm making 20,000 a month, but it's all accounted for.
Right.
So it's like, chip away at something and then add what you want, instead of like, I don't have all this debt and then I want to have all this nice stuff on top of it too. It's a shaky foundation
Right.
on one income.
For sure. For
So.
sure. That's education right there. So